Good evening, everybody. If you're able, can I ask that you remain standing whilst my chaplain, the Reverend Saunders, offers prayers for this meeting.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Nice to be here. Let's pray. We meet in the presence of God to praise him for his goodness to us, both now and in the past, to pray for his blessing upon our borough, and to affirm all that is good here, to seek forgiveness for whatever is amiss, and to ask that our lives and our communities may be transformed and renewed in the service of all our people. We pray for the life we share in this borough, for the laws which protect us and guard our freedom, for the courtesies which enhance our lives and the friendships which support us. We pray for men and women of principle and courage, for those whose vigilance protects our freedom and whose protest guards our corporate conscience. We pray for those who support charities and hospitals, places of learning and libraries in this borough, and for those who by their enterprise and efforts have created employment and enhanced our environment. We pray for the great diversity of people and races who have enriched the life of the community in succeeding generations, for those who look to the living God as their inspiration, whose presence and example have enhanced our corporate life, strengthened love, truth, peace, and justice in our midst. We pray for those who, from a variety of faiths and beliefs, have endeavoured to influence the life of this borough in order that we may understand our differences and share our common convictions. God, we give thanks for you who have called us to live in this borough of Wigan and Lee. Lead us on our journey as citizens of heaven, that we may come at last to that city with eternal foundations, where you live and reign forever and ever. Amen. And a short Christmas blessing, if I may, to finish with. May the joy of the angels, the eagerness of the shepherds, the perseverance of the wise men, the obedience of Joseph and Mary, and the peace of the Christ child be yours this Christmas. And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be upon you and remain with you and those you love now and always. Amen. Thank you, everybody.
Please be seated. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, got it in balance. Right. Good evening, everybody. And obviously, we're in the festive period, so I wish everybody an enjoyable Christmas and New Year to come. I'm obliged to run through some housekeeping prior to tonight's business. We're not expecting a fire drill, therefore, if one sounds, please can you follow officers who will lead you to the nearest fire exit, where we will gather at an assembly point on Believe Square. Officers will assist members of the public who are in the public gallery. Can I remind members of the need to respect each other, and I will continue to chair these meetings fairly and to show impartiality. Members of the public are welcome, but should be aware that they should not interrupt proceedings, as disruption may result in removal from the public gallery. The rules of conduct for the meeting have been circulated in advance of the meeting, and copies are available on your desks. Item number 1, our apologies for absence. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have apologies this evening from Councillor Crosby, Councillor Gallagher, Councillor Guest, Councillor Hulton, Councillor Hodgkinson, Councillor D.T. Molyneux, MBE, Councillor P. Molyneux, Councillor O'Neill, Councillor O'Fish. Do we have any further apologies this evening? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Item number 2, our minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of September 2023. I'll invite the Deputy Leader to move as correct and Councillor Raymond to second.
Move, Mr Mayor.
Second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Can I put these minutes to the vote? All those in favour of accepting the minutes, please show. Okay, thank you. Any absence? Any against? Abstentions? Thank you. That's moved. Number 3 are my main announcements. First one is the King's Award for Voluntary Service. I'm delighted to congratulate the recipients of the King's Award for Voluntary Service. We have an incredible 5 recipients this year in our borough, the most we've ever had in a single year. I would like to congratulate the Bridges Community Group, Kilgore Grange Residents and Friends, Place to Place Football Club, One House based in Aspel, and finally Wigan Youth Zone. I also want to congratulate Tom Aspinall on a successful heavyweight title win in the Ultimate Fighting Championship 295 at Madison Square Garden in New York. What a night that was. On behalf of the council, I wish Tom every success in his future fights, and I'm sure that success is shared and best wishes are shared by everybody in the council chamber tonight. Sporting achievements. It's with great pleasure that I can report that Wigan Warriors won the Super League Grand Final on the 14th of October at Old Trafford, beating the Catalan Dragons by 10 points to 2 in a nail-biting final. Wigan will now play the NRL Grand Final winners, Penrith Panthers, in the World Cup Challenge in 2024. Unfortunately, condolences. On behalf of everyone here at Wigan Council, I would like to send heartfelt condolences to the family and friends of the two men who lost their lives in a tragic accident at Crankwood Canal, Abram, on the 28th of November. Our thoughts and prayers are with them during this incredibly difficult time. I would like to record our thanks to the emergency services officers who attended trying to save them, and I think it's appropriate we stand in a minute's silence out of respect. Okay, thank you everyone. Please be seated. Excuse me. Item number 4, declarations of interest. The monitoring officer has provided advice to all members and relevant guidance has been issued. Members are asked to consider relevant interest for the purpose of this meeting if there are any interest declared. Members must leave the room during a relevant item. Please fill in the form you find on your seats with the agenda. Return this to Democratic Services officers at the end of the meeting. Can I remind members who are council house tenants that they will have a personal and prejudicial interest in this item, but they can stay in the meeting and vote. Please advise Democratic Services if you are a council tenant. Item number 5, update from Cabinet portfolio holders. And I think the first we have is Councillor Cunliffe.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. At the budget meeting this year, we agreed or confirmed that we would ensure that care workers working in social care in this borough receive as a minimum the real living wage. That was for direct staff and all commission services, and we made arrangements for those with direct payments to receive an uplift to ensure that their personal assistants received at least real living wage. We also made it an opportunity for care homes and private providers in the borough to sign up to paying their workers, their care workers, real living wage. And I'm pleased to say that 80% of the care homes in this borough have agreed to sign up, and we have funded that difference to ensure the real living wage. Of course, that is a significant burden on us. Well, it's not a burden, it's a pleasure, because we think people should actually receive the real living wage, and particularly in the care sector where there is a difficulty in recruitment of staff and staff on low wages. And actually what we were doing was ensuring that those working in the care sector, and we need to remember the COVID inquiry is on now, and the tremendous work and stress and pressure that those care workers many who were on minimum wage at the time. So to pay them real living wage is right and proper thing to do. One, to encourage recruitment and retention. And what we've seen over the 9 months since we agreed that is that recruitment and retention has improved, that staff welcome the fact that they're now paid real living wage, and recognise and accept that the council has made that possible for them. So I just think it's great that over 80%, and we can get the other 20% to agree to that, because those people are people who live in this borough on low wages, and whatever we can do to make their life better, to increase their wealth by a small amount, I admit, but to increase their wealth and give them real living wage has been a real opportunity. And I think it's been a great success. Of course, with the rise in the real living wage, it will cost us significantly more this year, but we wait for the settlement from the government, because, of course, every authority has care staff working in there with a social service responsibility. And whilst we welcome the rise in the real living wage, then that is a financial burden on hard-pressed councils. And I would expect that in having raised the real living wage, the government will make some acknowledgement and give those councils the funding in order to cover that uplift. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunliffe. Councillor Raymond, I think I've got you next on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, now is a crucial time for local government finances as we start the arduous task of next year's budget setting. The last 6 months have seen an unprecedented number of local authorities declaring financial difficulties, with warnings coming from right across the country. The pressures have been caused by a perfect storm: stubbornly high inflation, rapidly rising demand, fluctuating interest rates, a difficult labour market, and above all, the legacy of a decade of cuts which has reduced councils' spending power by half. Councils across the country and of all political colours are united in saying that local government funding is not sustainable anymore. An increasing number of councils are warning that they could effectively go bankrupt in the coming months. And to be more precise, this morning, LGA declared that 51 councils are at risk of going bankrupt in the next 12 months. The Cross-Party Local Government Association, Special Interest Group of Municipal Authorities, and the County Council Network have warned that councils in England will face a £4 billion budget shortfall by March 2025. But I am pleased, Mr. Mayor, that the leader of this council wrote a letter to the Chancellor in advance of the autumn statement. The letter reminded the Chancellor that it's not sustainable for local authorities to be spending 2/3 of their budget on adult and social care services. The letter outlined Wigan Council's current budget pressures and urged the Chancellor to take urgent action to preserve the vital services that people heavily rely on and deliver a fair deal for people in Wigan. We reminded the Chancellor that this council is grappling with inflation, a major factor which has not been properly accounted for by this government. In particular, energy costs, which have risen by over £4 million per year. As a result of these pressures, the council has had to reassess everything in its budgets: its capital programme, its revenue spending, its housing delivery, its community funds, its welfare offer, and most importantly, Mr. Mayor, its work on early intervention and prevention projects. We reminded the Chancellor that increasing costs to support the children and young people in residential and supported accommodation and home-to-school transport costs continue to be a significant pressure. Despite investing £30 million in this area over the last 5 years, a further £7 million is required before a balanced budget is achieved. We alerted the Chancellor that homelessness and lack of housing is a constant pressure for us, with over 14,000 people on our housing waiting list. And whilst the Council is looking at all options and working proactively with private sector, it is anticipated that there will be a £5 million overspend next year. We told the Chancellor that despite additional social care grants and taking a maximum social care precept, adult social care is still struggling because of the increasing demand and an unfunded increase in the national living wage. But sadly, Mr. Mayor, it appeared the Chancellor wasn't listening. There was no additional funding beyond what was announced at the last statement. Especially disappointing that there was nothing additional for children's services, which is the most significant pressure for local government today. Mr. Mayor, rather than protecting vital public services and avoiding increasing the council tax burden on families, once again, the government is forcing councils to increase council tax bills and make residents pay more for less. Mr. Mayor, local authorities have done everything in their capacity to innovate and save money. We've done the restructures, we've done the asset sales, we've done the staff reduction, we've done the service redesign, and we've done the transformation. And most of the councils are running out of their reserves. Mr. Mayor, the only conclusion I can draw, and it seems like the government is forcing the councils to return the town hall keys back to the government, because the current system at the current funding level is not sustainable at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Raymond. Councillor Bullen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for inviting me to speak. From our children's services, 2 updates. The first is with regard to care leavers. We have a strong corporate parenting offer in Wigan to improve outcomes for our care leavers. Our care leavers hub provides the safe space care leavers told us they wanted, and a base for partners to work collaboratively with each other and with our care leavers. From the Care Leavers Hub, we continue to offer targeted mental health support on a weekly basis, delivered by colleagues from Greater Manchester Mental Health. In addition, we've recently commissioned a new emotional health and well-being service. Our young people chose to call it Our Safe Space. This offer includes support for personal advisors at the hub, along with direct work with care leavers and group work supporting young people who suffer from low mood and anxiety. Other drop-in support at the Care Leavers Hub includes health, sexual health and relationship advice, DWP coaching, and education, employment and training support. The hub has food, toiletries, cleaning supplies, bedding and access to laundry facilities, so young people can access practical help, especially during this cost of living crisis. Young people have told us that having the Care Leavers Hub means they feel less isolated. One care leaver said, "The hub is a really good space to come and spend time. You can just be yourself and chill out or get some help." Recently, we had a local government association peer review, an independent review looking at our offer for care leavers. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. They told us that our strengths included amazing staff, inspirational leaders, and knowing ourselves well. Our offer to care leavers, such as setting up home grants, free council tax, gym membership, internet and laptop help, and much more, surpasses that of most local authorities, and they told us that we have much to be proud of. The reviewers also commented on the excellent partnership working between Council and Wigan Leigh College to promote education, employment and training. Finally, in this section, there was recognition that separated young people, our term for unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, is an area that will require additional resource due to expanding numbers allocated to Wigan. Currently, we have 29 over 18 separated young people in the Leaving Care team, and there are currently 66 separated children under the age of 18 who will transfer to the Leaving Care team in the next 12 months. And I want to just say a few words about our family hubs. Wigan Borough's first family hub, I'm pleased to say, was launched in Wigan Central in October of this year, with plans for 6 more to open next year. Family hubs are a way of bringing together all the support a family may need, from pregnancy through to young people turning 19, or 25 if they have a special educational need or disability. At the Meadows in Wigan Central, the Family Hub now has 31 different services operating from the hub, and this includes a full range of services for the whole family, with drop-ins, appointments and training being available. Some services are available from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Recent feedback comes from a parent who attended a parent carer forum drop-in session in November after she'd seen the session promoted online. The parent was really anxious because her child was a long time waiting to be seen by CAMHS. However, the Family Hub was able to facilitate intervention by a mental health worker at the hub with follow-up at the child's school. The parent also benefited from a healthy relationships group and is taking up an Understanding Your Child course, again provided by the Family Hub, in the place where the family lives and where there's easy access.
Councillor Bullen, I think your time's up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for your contribution. Councillor Anderton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wigan Council is going to show its support for campaigns that end gender-based violence and reaffirm its commitment to our campaign, Love is Not Abuse. Everyone should have a white ribbon now on their desk, and I would ask if you do have one, please wear it. This year again, we've planned 16 days of action supporting the White Ribbon campaign, a leading charity which is engaging men and boys to end violence against women and girls, so please show your support. The Love is Not Abuse campaign is Wigan Council's award-winning campaign and was developed alongside victims. It was designed to highlight the warning signs of domestic abuse. No matter what your sexuality is, it's open to everyone, and encourages others to seek advice as well and support from the services that we've commissioned across the borough, that being DIAS. I want to move on now to fire safety because it's cold and people are bringing heaters back into their houses as well. And I've had the privilege this morning to spend a day at the Bury Fire Training and Rescue Centre, and what an immense centre that is in itself. As the cold nights come in and people are plugging in those heaters, I just want to reassure people that if you have a concern for a resident, the fire service do offer free fire safety consultations in your home for all residents. So it's taking that offer up, not plugging too many devices, not plugging heaters into multiple extension leads and double sockets and so on. Simple things which sometimes we can forget. But
just ask for quiet, please, while my Councillor Anderton continue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. But every school as well has the option to visit this centre, and I encourage every school in your wards, anyone in this room now, your wards, encourage the schools, the primary schools, high schools, if they can, to attend. If you can support that, please do. I know Councillor Harding and Councillor Wales have been particularly keen to kind of spread the word about this offering across all schools. But prevention is key, and this is kind of the message I want to take away today. Prevention is key here, and Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue have done a lot of work engaging with the public to do a lot of preventative work, and this area is a really good area for success. You may have also seen we've just ended our consultation to extend our public space protection orders across Wigan Town Centre and Lee Town Centre. I want to just kind of report back that the consultation was overwhelmingly positive. People welcoming the efforts here, and what we're going to do now moving forward, now that that has been agreed, is to have monthly days of action within the Wigan Town Centre and Lee Town Centres as well, which tend to always flag as some of our key hotspot areas for antisocial behaviour and other activities as well. So that is partnership working with GMP, working with our homeless support teams to engage people, but if necessary as well, to take the relevant enforcement action to make our town centres safe places for everyone to be in. Keeping on the theme of town centres and retail, you may have seen in the press and also in the TV that retail thefts are up. They're up across the country, we're around 20%, and we're not immune, sadly, here in the Wigan Borough. But what I can say is that now GMP do have a dedicated team working at the HQ and kind of helping support local teams in tackling shop thefts. But what is surprising now is the level of violence that is going with some of these shoplifting offences. So I want to kind of reassure members in the room that we are working in partnership with GMP, with a number of other stakeholders, to engage retail owners, to engage with the retail areas, in many different places, including the Parsonage Retail Park, which is in my own ward, but kind of affects the wider area of Lee as well. We'll be increasing patrols in these hotspot areas, but also establishing business tenant forums to engage and improve communication, to improve reporting as well along those lines. But I want to kind of stress, if there is an instance of shoplifting that you witness, that a member of the public witnesses, please ring it up, please dial it in, ring 999, contact 101, give them the information, because without those reports we can't act. And if there is a seriousness of violence in those instances of shoplifting, GMP are guaranteeing a response to those areas if there's violence involved. So please do report, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Anderton. And finally, Councillor Cunliffe, on behalf of the leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the absence of the leader and in his portfolio for economic regeneration, I'd like to welcome that finally Lee got its levelling up bid of 11.4 million. The end of a long process, because we were intending to submit a bid in in round one of the levelling up fund, which were based on parliamentary constituencies. So a bid was put together for Lee, but was not supported by the Lee MP. And bids had to have the priority support of their MP. So we didn't submit the bid. The bid was only for the 11.4. The schemes in the bid all approved and supported by the MP, but he wouldn't support the bid because he wanted the bid to be more. In fact, we had a bid that was more, but he wouldn't agree with the scheme, so he wouldn't sign it. He then proposed another scheme to be added, which was financially unviable. Not only from our assessment, but from an independent assessment. And the result of that would be an unviable part of a bid would end the whole bid, in effect. You won't get it. So we didn't support it. So we didn't put that in at the last minute because he wasn't supporting it. We then put in a level 2 bid for the 11.4 million because we couldn't get an agreement with the MP who wanted an unviable bid that didn't meet the cost-benefit analysis of the benefit of the scheme, and he wouldn't support the scheme that we wanted. So we put in the £11.4 million bid for 3 schemes: improvements to the shop fronts in Bradshawgate, refurbishment of the market, and the provision of civic amenity space. All of which he supported, but he wouldn't support the bid. Because he wouldn't support the bid because he wanted to put in a bid in round 3 for the full 20 million. Bearing in mind that it was up to 20 million any levelling up bid was to be. Not only on that round 2 did he not support the bid. I don't know whether he was aware of it, but a Conservative Party member who stood as a Conservative candidate in the local elections wrote to the Department of Levelling Up Communities and Housing asking the Minister to refuse our bid. So not only was the MP not supporting it, we had Tory members.
Councillor Jones, yes. How can I forget you, Councillor Jones? Can you indicate which law or rule or procedure from the Council's constitution has been breached, and also outline how it has been breached?
Updates. I'm not interested in Conservative candidates on what they've said on Facebook or where they've written. These are updates. And as well, Mr. Mayor, you're shaking your head in agreement with him. Let me remind you that you're actually unbiased. You meant to be independent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Do you want to continue, Deputy Leader?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, he didn't support that bid, despite supporting the 3 schemes, and wanted a round 3 bid for £20 million, even though he wouldn't approve our scheme, and his scheme was unviable. Unfortunately for him, round 3 ceased to be a competitive bidding round, and the Department of Levelling Up took bids that had been unsuccessful in round 2, and agreed this. And the letter states that the bid was impressive and would meet the cost benefit from the investment. So I welcome that investment. He welcomed it, but actually we got it in spite of him, not because of him. Unfortunately, he's only got about a maximum of 12 months in post before we see him go, for somebody who will support the town, who will support the regeneration of the town, and see that Lee gets a town centre to be proud of.
Okay, and we move on to item 6A, appointment of the monitoring officer. Following a recent appointment to the post of Assistant Director of Legal Governance and Elections, and in accordance with Section 5 of the Local Government and Housing Act of 1989, the Council are required to confirm Janet Davis' appointment as a monitoring officer for the Council. Part 3, Section 6.4 of the Council's Constitution states that the Assistant Director of Legal Governance and Elections will hold the monitoring officer position. I invite the Deputy Leader to move and Councillor Raymond to second.
Move the appointment, Mr. Mayor.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Can I ask all those in favour to raise their hands to confirm, please? Okay, any against? Okay, any abstentions? Okay. I think that was called for, Councillor Bareilly. Well, you've received your first warning, Councillor Bareilly. Item 6B is the appointment of the Section 151 officer. Following his recent appointment to the post of the Director of Finance and Legal, and in accordance with Section 151 of the Local Government Act 1972, the Council are required to confirm Tony Clark's appointment as a Section 151 officer for the Council. Part 3, Section 6.4 of the Council's Constitution states that the Director of Finance and Legal will hold the Section 151 officer position. Again, I invite the Deputy Leader to move the appointment and Councillor Raymond to second.
Move the appointment, Mr. Mayor.
Glad to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Can I see all those in favour, please? Please show. Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, that's sorted. Thank you. That motion's carried. Item 6C, appointment of Honorary Alderman. The Council is requested to consider the report and recommendations of the Honorary Alderman Nominations Committee at page 21 of the agenda. I would like to draw your attention to the proposed date in the report of the 14th of February for the special meeting of Council. Please be advised that this date has now been moved to the 28th February at 3 p.m. and will precede an extraordinary meeting of full Council. I call on Deputy Leaders to move the recommendations in the report and the special meeting to be held on the 28th of February 2024 at 3 p.m.
Move that, Mr. Mayor.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Oh. In favour of the recommendations with the new date of the 20th of February at 3 p.m, please show. Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, that's carried. Section 6C is the extraordinary meeting of full Council. Following on from the previous item, I'm now asked that the Council agrees to a recommendation for an extraordinary meeting for Council to be convened at 6 p.m. on the 28th of February. This meeting will be for the adoption of the Places for Everyone plan and is being called as there is no suitable meeting on full Council planned to accommodate this report. Again, can I ask the Deputy Leader to move and Councillor Prescott to second?
Move the recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
To second, Mr. Mayor, can I reserve my right to speak, please?
All those in favour, please show. Okay, thank you. Any against? That's great. Section 60 are the Local Authority Governor Report. The Council is requested to approve the nominations for Governor vacancies and a reappointment set out on the report on page 31 of the agenda. I invite Councillor Bullen to move the recommendations.
To move the recommendations, Mr. Mayor.
Beg to second, Mr Mayor.
Okay. All those in favour of accepting the recommendations set out in the report, please show. I think that's unanimous. Thank you. The vote is carried. Section 6E is the annual report from the Chair of the Audit, Governance and Standards Committee. The Council is requested to consider the report set out at page 37 of the agenda. The Council requested to accept the 2022-23 annual report from the Chair of Audit, Governance and Standards Committee. I invite the Deputy Leader to move the recommendations.
Move the recommendation, Mr Mayor.
And Councillor Raymond to second.
Second, Mr Mayor.
Okay. Do any members wish to contribute to this debate? Councillor Barilli.
Obviously, I got my papers late and my iPad's not working in here, so I'll have to try to remember what I found out. I was going through the figures today, and it seems like we've got £157 million in bank, which is really good. Considering last time we did this, we had 137
Councillor
million.
Barilli, I think you might be on the wrong report. The Treasury management comes a bit later.
Well,
so
if somebody had set this up for me, Mr Mayor,
I'll
it won't work.
okay. I'll ask that appropriate assistance is given to you on there. Otherwise, I would.
The paperwork only came this morning.
Okay. Can I suggest perhaps you share with your friend Councillor Jones in terms of that? In that case, all those in favour? Okay. Anybody against? That's great, that's carried. Okay, so we move on to item 7, which is the HRA Rent Setting Report 24-25. Can I remind members who are council tenants that they will have a personal and prejudicial interest in this item, but they can stay in the meeting and vote. On pages 51 to 60 of the agenda, we have a report which was presented to the Housing Advisory Panel prior to being considered by the Cabinet on the 23rd of November. The report was also considered by the Competent Council Scrutiny Committee at a later meeting on the 23rd of November. The Council is requested to agree the recommendations as set out in the agenda. I invite the Deputy Leader to move the recommendations.
Move the recommendation, Mr Mayor.
Are they seconded?
Second, Mr Mayor.
Are you reserving your right to speak?
I do reserve the right to speak.
Okay, so we open up the debate now to any other members who may wish to contribute on this item. We've got Councillor Barilli, I think it is. Oh, sorry, Councillor Watson first, then Councillor Barilli.
We're talking about rent going on.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor, for allowing me to speak on this. Now, in the past 2 years, we've seen a 10% increase in our social rents. And now, with this 7.7% increase, that's almost 20% when compounded over that 25-month period. Now, if this was the private sector, you know, there'd be outrage. 20% over a 2-year period. Yet, as 76% of all our residents live in social houses and we receive a full or partial housing benefit or universal credit, then I guess it's okay because the benefits will pay for this. But what about the 5,050 residents in homes who are not in receipt of any benefits? What about the hard-working families who are going to suffer the most, who are already struggling and at breaking point? Then we must consider the justification of this increase to meet net carbon zero. By spending £15,000 per home to reduce carbon emissions, this is madness. This is £312 million for the whole housing stock to make them carbon neutral. Just think how many social houses we could build with that money. Now, we must also consider the debt management within the HRA, especially the £99 million self-financing loan from 2012, which costs £3.5 million per year in interest payments alone. Now, this is just 25% of our total interest payments within this account, so that is £14 million a year just in interest alone. With almost, I think it's just over 41% of the HRA, repayment loans and repaying interest. Now, when we have 14,000 people or 14,000 families on a housing waiting list, and considering we're one of the poorest boroughs in terms of the average wage, which in where I live alone is the average wage per household is £24,000, how can we justify this increase for a carbon neutral agenda? It's just absurd. This £312 million would be better used creating more social housing, which would in turn increase the prosperity of our low earners and more financially vulnerable. So I think we should prioritise to fill our empty garages. Let's improve the turnaround time for our empty properties to weeks, not months, and stop retaining properties for those who've been sentenced to short and medium prison sentences. And of course, there's always the Deputy Leader's right to buy. Right to buy has been going on for 40 years now. So why don't we write to the government to abolish right to buy once and for all? So I can't support this motion I can't support this rent increase of 7.7% in a time when our low earners are struggling so much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Bareilly.
All right, can I sit down, man? Yeah, I think it's a totally outrage percentage rate going on the rents when people are struggling. It's supposed to be a caring Labour Party for the people, but you're not showing it again. But you don't care. I know you don't care about what we say to you, whatever you mean. But yeah, he's right, Councillor Watson. It's all about when somebody vacates council house, there's no officers for going and check what these contractors are doing. And the price of what they're charging us is sky high. There's a property in Ingley Green, there's a window broke. Domestic violence, right? That girl's never going to come back in their house, and that gentleman's going to jail. In fact, I think he is in jail. So why is it not repair the window and let somebody get in it? Why is it, let's go on the scheme, let's replace everything? You know what I mean? There was another house in Ingley Green. They replace everything in the house. Everything you can look at, they replace this council. And the woman who smashed the house up was given a brand new council house. You can't make it up what you're doing. There's no structure or anything. You know what I mean? It's a disgrace. There's a contractor. Residents come to me and said this contractor's been to their house 5 times for the same thing. Are we paying 5 times the amount for that contractor to repair that boiler or do whatever they do? The scope's disgraceful. We won't have it in our houses, so why should we have it in our council houses? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bareilly. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I hope you have a lovely Christmas, and to the rest of you as well. I've just been complimenting the Cabinet member about how passionate she is outside about council housing, so I'm going to hold my reserve and ask a question regarding the rent increase, because my concern with anything with council housing at the moment is the repair times that I raised on a motion a couple of meetings ago. And for various reasons, COVID certainly didn't help. You know, we're in a national financial crisis, and I believe there's improvements that we can make in this place. But our residents have never had it so hard when it comes to getting repairs done. Partly to blame, I blame the contractors, and I also think a low morale now with the inspectors is causing them to look for reasons not to repair houses as well. So could I ask, this rent increase, is this purely to fill a gap that we financially have and nothing's going to improve? Or do we have a plan with this increase that it's going to look at maybe employing more inspectors, maybe taking on more of our own tradesmen and looking at really improving it? Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Raymond, did you want to use your... Okay. Councillor Gambles. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to speak. What I'll do, I'll take it, what some of the items that you've raised. I hope I'll actually be able to give you some answers to what you're concerned about. The 500 homes that have not got support from a benefit perspective, what we're doing, we're working with our welfare teams, we're targeting those households, we're making sure that we're maximising the income. We have the ability to do that now because of the computer packages that we've designed in-house within the council. Other people in Greater Manchester, other councils are actually buying in what we've got the ability to drill down right into households, and we're doing it in a different way where we're actually approaching people by letter, telephone. We're actually meeting people generally because we've got the people on our estates as well. We're able to have those conversations with from our tenant engagement perspective, our caretakers and everything else to try and actually encourage them. I will keep asking everybody to keep promoting the Help for You, Here for You campaign, the yellow leaflet that you take into your surgeries. So there will be some support out there for people who are not on benefits or part benefits. Carbon neutral, it's a national thing that we have to do. It's something that we don't have any choices on. We're doing some pilot projects. We're trying to actually understand how much it does cost, what the timeframes are, so that we can actually include that in. I absolutely agree with you about the 3.5 million that's going to government. Absolutely appalling that they're actually not. When I first took on the post of this, I asked about it. We've no. So why we're paying this money out? Can we not actually change and have a look at the interest rates, or can we have a look at making the period longer? Can they not write it off? Now, I'm sure that there's going to be a motion coming. I've actually done a list of motions. This is one of them. I'm sure I'm going to get a unanimous support then in that case in respect of getting government to consider writing off the debt, because that's £3.5 million back into the housing revenue account. By the way, I just need to mention as well, it is a ring-fenced account. All of the rents that come in go into the housing revenue account. Anything that's spent on housing comes from that account. It can't come from anywhere else. So there's some of the things that's happening there. You've mentioned about other interest rates. We do have to borrow in order to do some of the work that we do, including some new build. For every £1 million that's actually in our HRA account, you can borrow about 40 million. So that's some of the interest rates that's going up. There is a lot, but we do have a period of where it's 40 years of when it's break even. But that's something that most people do from a commercial perspective. So low earners, you've talked about private. Voids we're talking about in a bit. So I'll actually bring it up there because I think Councillor Gerard's asking a question on that. Right to buy. I was horrified when I first started work. I was down south. I was doing development down there for a housing association. And then when somebody went off on holiday, they asked me to do right to buy. So what do you mean right to buy? I'm just actually building all these and you're selling them. So totally and utterly agree with you. And I don't think anybody in this chamber would think anything different about the right to buy. For Councillor Brealey, we do have people to check. We do the properties. And again, I will be bringing it up in the void question, so I can give you a little bit more detail in that. We only pay once. If it takes, we try and get it right first time, but for the contractors, they only get paid once, regardless of how many times they come to do a repair. They don't get any extra for that. And in respect of the repairs and everything else, you're right, we need to grow our own. We're doing that in the depot. Excuse me. We're working with the colleges. We're making sure we've got apprenticeships. It's been very difficult to actually get traders into the depot. What we're doing enhancements in order to encourage them to come along as well. So that's one of the things that we are doing. The repair times, you're right, that's actually improving now because of the way that we're actually working more closely with the lettings team, the people who are actually handing the keys back, and working with the depot team. So they're actually a better synergy, better understanding. We're improving some of our systems, which we need to. We still have not got the digital side of it sorted out properly, completely, but it's underway, and we've identified places that we need to do it. What we're doing in the future, we've got a stock condition survey that we're doing, so we actually know exactly what we need to do so we can plan our long-term plan maintenance and our cyclical maintenance and all the repairs as well. So that hopefully I've answered all of the questions there, but if not, always come and talk to me. If there's any questions you've got, happy to answer them. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gambles. Councillor Raymond, did you want to use your right to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I think Councillor Gambles has covered everything very passionately, and I admire her for her passion for the portfolio that she holds. And again, can I just reiterate that this is not one of those decisions that we take lightly. We do understand, we recognise the problems that our residents are facing, and especially the tenants in our housing and the troubles that they have financially. We absolutely recognise those troubles. But can I just say, financially, it is a stand-alone account. The only income it has comes from dwelling rents. There is no other money in our general accounts that we can use for to bridge the budget gap in HRA, and vice versa. We can't use HRA's money for our general accounts. So a couple of points that Councillor Watson and Councillor Jones have made. So Councillor Watson, you've made some really complicated points. We have a duty to provide safer, better and adequate housing for our tenants. So you mentioned about energy, getting more energy efficient housing. We have to do it. We have no choice, especially what has happened in Grenfell Tower and what has happened recently in Rochdale. We have no choice but to be legally abiding by those rules. Councillor Jones, you asked a very pertinent question, that whether this money that we are going to raise is going to be used for filling the budget gap. No, it will not be. It will be used for improvement of more housing, repair claims, we have insurance claims, we have an ambitious, I would say an ambitious house building programme. So this will be used to replenish that stock and everything to improve our HRA. It will not be used to fill any budget gaps. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Raymond. Councillor Cunliffe, do you want to sum up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think both Councillor Gambles and Councillor Raymond have explained to people that the housing revenue account is a ring-fenced account. The only money that goes in is rents. The only money that can come out is to spend on our housing. Now, Councillor Watson talks about the rise. He works it out at 20%. I think it was 7% last year and 7.7% this year. Bearing in mind that the only money in the housing revenue account comes from rents, and that has to pay for repairs, for disrepair claims, for upgrading and improving our housing in terms of new bathrooms from time to time, all the new things that we do to the house to refurbish the house, and to build new housing. You know, with 14,000 people on the housing waiting list to build new housing. We're not able to do many, but we are able to do some. Now, the government for 4 years said we had to reduce rents by 1%. So we had 1% less, plus inflation, which wasn't accounted for. So we lost about £30 million out of the housing revenue account over that period. Last year, we were limited to the 7% when inflation was 10, 11%. And we know the cost of goods and services, and Councillor Jones will know, in the building trade, the supplies went up well in excess of 10%. So there's all that to cope with. So if we want to keep or improve the repairs, the housing, the building housing and everything, we have to do it through that. It doesn't help that we had to take out, and the government forced us to take out, a £99 million loan, which we have to pay £3.5 million interest on. Out of the housing revenue account. Now, we can ask for that to be written off, but we're given no option or choice in that. The other thing Councillor Watson seems to think is I'm somehow in favour of my right to buy scheme. Well, I can say I've always opposed the right to buy scheme. And I'm quite happy for us to write to the government about that, but in all honesty, I don't think, one, they have any intention of abolishing the right to buy, and certainly within the next 12 months they haven't got time to introduce that through Parliament. What I will do though is I will speak to Joe Platt, the next MP for Lee, to speak to the next Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, to see if the Labour Party and the new Labour government will be able to do something about the right to buy. So I will do that for you.
Right, Councillor Cunliffe, thank you for that. We'll move to the vote now. All those in favour of accepting the recommendation as set out in the report, please show. Okay, thank you. All those against? Okay, recommendation. Any abstentions? Okay, So do we? Thank you. The vote is carried. Item 7B is a Treasury Management half-yearly review. The Council requests to consider the report set out at page 61 of the agenda. The Council is requested to approve the position on Treasury Management and the changes to the capital programme as appended and set out in the report. I invite the Deputy Leader to move the recommendations.
The recommendation, Mr Mayor.
And Councillor Raymond to second.
Second, Mr Mayor, and I reserve the right to speak later.
Okay. Do we have any members who wish to contribute? Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just before I start, although I voted against that, can I just thank the Cabinet members for coming back and giving us answers. Can never complain, even if we don't agree necessarily sometimes. Really appreciate you coming back to us. So I'm going to ask a question more than a statement. And I've been Googling this figure to try and make sure whether it's millions or thousands, but in the past I've had an habit of saying it wrong, and I'm not giving you the excuse to laugh at me on it. So I'm going to ask. In the... Anybody? Oh, I thought I heard someone, sorry, Mr Mayor.
Being if you are interrupted.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, don't worry. I like a good debate. We should have more of it. So, in the report, under the Town Centre Investment Fund, we have the figure, a 6-digit figure of 5942-2. Now, if I'm not mistaken, that's going to either be 59,000 or it's going to be 59 million. Now, if it's the latter, and I stand to be corrected if I'm wrong, I hope it's not, we was talking before about possibly having a black hole of £5 million next year. Was it 20-something million last year? What I'd like to ask is, that figure that we're spending this year, I'll give time if you want to have a look through the report, it's about 3/4 way down, it would seem nonsensical to me if we're saying we're struggling for money and blaming the Conservatives while we're spending millions and millions on a town centre which nobody wants the development for. Obviously, as I've said before in here, we can't afford it. I put on social media a few months ago that I don't think we have the investment for it after the answers I had back. My colleague over here, Maureen, did a freedom of information request and it seemed to come back that there is no investment. And that's what's really concerning me, because I agree with what you say with the black hole. I agree with a lot of what you say about the government. I think at times, looking at last meeting, Councillor Cunliffe says independent Conservatives. I'd say at times it looks more like the Labour Conservative Party, especially under Keir Starmer. So I don't agree with everything the government do by any means. But if you're going to spend millions and millions and then complain about 5 million black hole, maybe we should look a little bit more at ourselves and what we have the power to control. So if anybody could let me know that figure. If it isn't millions, I'm glad to be wrong. Mr Mayor, thank you very much.
Councillor Jones. Councillor Raymond, did you want to use your response?
Thank you, Councillor Jones. And to be honest, I cannot find that figure. But what I can tell you is... Can I just say, if you can come directly to me, I'm more than happy to have a one-to-one meeting with you and explain all the numbers that are contained in this report. But can I reassure you there is no black hole of any £1 million in our budget. Our budget is balanced and we are looking to produce another balanced budget next year. So there is no black hole in our budget. But I'm more than happy to see you one-to-one.
Leader, do you wish to sum up? I'm sorry, Councillor Bareilly, you just came slightly too late there. I apologise.
No.
In which case, I'll ask those all members to show in favour of accepting the recommendation as set out in the report. I'm advised it started flashing after Councillor Raymond started her summing up, so in that case. Well, Councillor Raymond reserved her right to reply then. Anyway, my decision's made, thank you. So those in favour, please show. Okay, all those against? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. Councillor Braley. Oh, no, yes. 1.5 warnings, Councillor Braley. Oh, no, I think you're very near the borderline, Miss Councillor Braley, so just wind your neck in a little bit. Item number 9 is the questions and comments. So I've got Councillor Gerard who wishes to ask 2 questions. Do you want to ask your first question, Councillor Gerard?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The question is basically, it's good to see the council investing in culture and arts, which is pleasing to see, and striving for purple flag status like we have in Wigan. But obviously the leader's not here tonight. But would the portfolio holder like to join me and congratulate the Snug in Atherton, run by the fantastic Rachel Fazak, in becoming the first venue in the country to be owned by the Music Venue Trust, who's got great aspirations for this place. It's a leader in its field. It's with the Early Doors Club as well. And also, would he like to add congratulations to the many bars that are opening up in Atherton. And I think it's one of the places to be at the moment, along with Tilsley and other areas. So would Atherton be able to be considered for purple flag status in the near future?
I think we've got Councillor Reedy to respond in the Leader's absence.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. On behalf of the Leader, can I actually congratulate what we've done here and with the Music Venue Trust, and can I just add that one of the things that really is outstanding what we've achieved over the last number of years, probably the last 5 years, is our relationship with the Arts Council. The Arts Council are backing this venue, which if they're going to do it, and the amount of work that officers have done, I've done personally with Sir Nick Sorota, who's the chair of the Arts Council. He's backing Wigan 100% in lots and lots of things. So I think having that in the last 5 years, we worked on that, so it's really good. One of the things you did mention about all the other bars and things that are opening up in that area. So what will be interesting to hear from the Arts Council and other bodies is the impact assessment it has on that area. This is not just about the Snug, this is about the area which it's all in. But it's a great thing that it's been achieved. The Arts Council are backing Wigan to the hilt, and I think we'll just wait for that report coming back on what's happened in that area, and hope we can replicate this across the borough in other areas. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Reedy. Councillor Gerard, do you want to ask your second question?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Back to the subject we've been speaking on really before. If you remember, I brought a motion to the council that I reluctantly withdrew. Basically over the turnaround of void properties in not just in Atherton but across the borough. Because it's very sad to see these properties being void for so long, which should be bringing us a revenue in, such as rent and council tax, if let out to the right tenants. That motion was basically to get a time scale of 4 to 6 weeks. I know that sounds hard, but when I put that motion in Atherton, there were 59 properties void. That's gone down in the 6-7 month period or whatever it is to 58, and a majority of them are the same properties. So on that basis alone, that's 2 per year. So we're talking 26 year at this rate before we even get the properties repaired. Now, that to anybody is wrong. I think every councillor in this room will see that the people coming to them with void properties, they want an house, they're stuck in hotels or in accommodation, live with mum and dads when they're in the mid-30s with families. It's totally wrong. And that's why I abstained on the last report. Because if we are going to put rents up, that money has to be invested back into repairs and mainly void properties. Because if we look at that pie chart, 27%, which equates to £25 million, is going back into delivery of services, and only 6% back into void properties, maybe less. So there's a bit of an imbalance there, in my opinion. And the sooner we can get these properties back into a suitable appearance and There is a carbon neutral, get all that. The sooner we can move on with the housing crisis. We've got 13,000 people at the last count, roughly. It's just shocking. We're too slow at it. So that we really need to be assured as a council. This shouldn't be political, because we've got to remember these are people's lives and the well-being. That all efforts will be made to reduce the void properties and take on board what we say. Make it weeks, not months, and in some cases, in some properties, years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gerard. I think Councillor Gambles is very keen to respond.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and hopefully I'll have some answers for you, Councillor Gerard, and thank you for your question. And I'm really pleased to confirm that we are making all efforts. It's already underway. It was taking place before. We make sure, as a responsible landlord, that we have to provide a home that's in decent standard. So often, when we actually get our voids back, there are issues with that particular property. It may be that the bathroom hadn't been done, the kitchen hadn't been done, so it does take time. What I would say to you is that in 2020-23, we actually spent £18.5 million on voids. Our budget was 15.6 million, and which is why we're looking at the housing revenue account in order to try and enhance that. And so that's nearly 3 million extra it cost for our voids. So we are making sure that we're actually doing the standards as the right standards. And I know that you like percentages, Councillor Watson, but it's 18% of an increase, which actually correlates to the cost of living, for the prices, for the materials and everything else. So there is some issues with that. Now, at the moment, there's always a churn with voids. We will always have voids in our borough. And at the moment, we've got 322 voids. But of those, 240 of those are already with WLBS, who are working on that. There are 66 that need to be inspected, and then they give the assessment of what needs to take place and what has to happen with that property. And quite often, there is potentially rewiring. There's need to be asbestos reports. There's potentially kitchens and bathrooms. So there is some big jobs that's needed, damp course. So we've got old properties. We need to make sure that they're fit for purpose, but also they've got longevity. So we don't have to keep coming backwards and forwards whilst people are in situ. So we need to, because they're their home, we want to make sure their home is clean, safe and warm. So that's why we're making sure that we do that when we do the voids themselves. At the moment, there's I think I mentioned 66 awaiting inspection, so we need to assess the damage, and then there's also 16 are awaiting asbestos removal, because that sometimes happens within the older properties. We have got asbestos and we need to remove that safely. And it's not just us that's got voids, it's the private sector as well. Now, the private sector at the moment has got 488 voids. But we've got an empty homes team that's working hard with those people, with those private owners, in order to bring those properties back into use, which we've been very successful on to date. There's 236 that have been brought back to use because of our support, helping people understand what we can do. Some people didn't even know they actually own the property. I think we've talked about that one last time when it was in Australia, but there are other people who did not know they've actually inherited a property. So we've been able to work with them as well. 19, really pleased to say, have been brought back as affordable homes, because those private owners are actually wanted to become an ethical landlord. We've got over 80 different people on our ethical landlord waiting list, and we do make sure that we've got opportunities to have affordable homes, because we need to have all of our partners involved in this so that we can actually make sure that we're providing rented accommodation at affordable rate for people on our waiting list, which we do. In addition, I can't read my writing now. Anyway, yeah. Oh, we've actually bought 7 of them as well. So out of those, so that's been brought back into our stock. So with all of those, we've got from a lettings perspective, our lettings, we've got 80 properties that have been allocated already. We're working to make sure that we get them out and get them into the home by Christmas. Some of them need some aids and adaptations. Some of them are just having the final inspection, because we always finally inspect and make sure everything's to a decent standard. And then some are actually having some carpets built. But I'd like to say, I hope you'll acknowledge the efforts that we're making. Happy to have further conversations with you. I hope this gives you some assurance, and I also would like to just give thanks to all those really hard-working council teams who have made this possible, who have now worked together very closely in order to actually make sure that we've got the voids up and running as fast as we can. But as fast as we do it, more comes along. So you will always see voids in the borough, but it's something that we're working on. It's just different voids. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gambles. We move on to Councillor Watson now. I believe you want to ask a question.
Yep, thank you for allowing me to this question, Mr Mayor. And I'd just like to, just before we start, just find Councillor Gambles has clearly got the hardest job within the council for her effort. So the question, I'll get on with it quite quickly. The question was put to, last year, the Leader of the Council wrote to the Office of Veterans Affairs and Johnny Mercer MP to seek funding for gym passes for veterans in the borough. The question is, has the council received a response yet? But just to give you a bit of context here and a bit of where this came from, about 2 years ago, I submitted a motion to the council asking for free gym passes for veterans within the borough. And then it went through its cabinet back to council, hence the letter. Now, it was denied because the cabinet, and I quote, that even if a small proportion of the 22,000 veterans in the borough took up a free offer for gym passes, it would cost a fortune. And I get that because we've all got to tighten our belts. So alternative usual, we decided to write to the government in the Office of Veterans Affairs and ask for an annual funding of £8.5 million. Now, I know that writing to the government seems to be standard policy of late, but the burden of responsibility for our veterans now falls under local authorities under the Armed Forces Act 2021. So, how do we compare to other councils in Greater Manchester? We currently have a discounted scheme for memberships for £26 for all veterans. And we have 83 veterans within the borough who currently enrol in that scheme. Now, compared to Bury Council, which offers free gym passes for all veterans, within the same period, they only had 75 veterans enrol on their scheme for free gym passes.
Is it a speech or a question you're asking, Councillor?
Oh, well, I'm just giving you a bit of context to where we're going here.
As long as you come to the point.
So why is this important then? Open source data from the Ministry of Defence, and I do believe I've got 5 minutes, Mr Mayor. Open source data provided by the Ministry of Defence just from the conflict in Afghanistan states that over 150,000 British troops served in Afghanistan, with 15,725 becoming casualties, creating approximately a 10% casualty rate. With the height of these casualties occurring in 2009-2010, which was also the year I served in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, alongside our fine local regiment, the Duke of Lancasters, who were recently given the freedom of the borough. So now I understand that the council's unwilling to provide free gym passes to all veterans within the borough, but we've got to widen our offer to those who have sacrificed the most, those who have been injured, those who have been injured, whether that's mental or physical with PTSD. We've got to give these an outlet somewhere. So what does this data tell us roughly? It tells us that 0.38%, there's a percentage for you there, Susan, 0.38% of our veterans take up our current offer of discounted gym passes. That the offering gym passes to all veterans would not cost a fortune, as per the recommendations from the Cabinet, and this is proven by Bury Council's declining and underutilised offer, as in the first year they had 200 veterans. And also, that the responsibility of our veterans lies under the local authority, under the Armed Forces Act 2021, which also states under the Armed Forces Covenant that we must look after our injured who have sacrificed so much. And so welfare provision does actually lie with us. And also that the Office of Veterans Affairs does not have a magic pot of gold that they can afford annually to provide £8.5 million per borough. So therefore, I just hope in the near future that this council will do the right thing and widen the current offer to those veterans who have sacrificed the most. And I'd just like to thank the Mayor for allowing me to speak for my full 5 minutes without interrupting me. And also, I look forward to the reply from the council. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Reedy, I think, is going to reply.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Firstly, I mean, you might think this is a bit orthodox. Can I congratulate Janet Davis on a new appointment? And I think you've served the council very well over the years and made, just because sometimes the answer's no doesn't mean it's not the right answer. And the reason I'm saying that is because I want Janet to kind of check something out here for me, that my answer will probably go down in the Guinness Book of Records as being the shortest, and that was probably the longest question. So the answer to the question is no.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Reedy. Move on to a final question, which is Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Has the Cabinet been given a date for the asylum seekers to be moved from Killie Court and information on where they will be moved to? Could I also comment that I was vilified and condemned by Labour councillors in this chamber for campaigning relentlessly on this issue on behalf of the people of Standish and Wigan? I was called divisive and hateful, and this rhetoric contributed to me being abused in public and called a fascist and a Nazi by certain people, some who are employees of the council, who to my knowledge have not been reprimanded for the hate speech they directed at me. Then, when the strenuous efforts of myself and all those residents who protested paid off, and the decision to house migrants in Killicourt was reversed, the council took credit for the very thing they had condemned me for, with no mention whatsoever of my contribution. The council only ever said Killicourt was unsuitable for housing asylum seekers. I am hoping they do not consider other areas of Wigan Borough more suitable. We are at capacity, there is no housing, and services are stretched.
Councillor Anderton, do you wish to respond?
Yes, I will respond, Mr Mayor, and I can say that no Labour councillor has vilified any independent directly, and if that is the case, then please do tell me who, because I can put on record no one on these benches has done that on social media, in person or face-to-face. So in true form, I can answer the question as stated in the agenda. In true form, this government has given us very little information on this particular matter, but what I can say for a fact is that the Home Office contract with McDonald Hotels in Worthington ends on the 31st of March 2024. Now, the next bit is my understanding based on the current numbers that are currently residing in Killie Court, and that's something that we monitor daily. The hotel could actually be empty before March, but that's no guarantee. Given how the numbers have dropped, it wouldn't surprise me if that was the case, though. However, if there are any residents left in Killie Court at the end of March, they will either be moved to other suitable accommodation, again, the standard line that the government give us, anywhere in the country, or they will receive a right to remain under the expedited process, which we've seen is kind of speeding up now in the Home Office. The government, again, being clear as mud with their decision-making and not being clear with local authorities as they have been throughout this entire process today. So there's still nothing confirmed, though, with McDonald Hotels as to what they're going to do with in the long term with Killie Court. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderton. At this point, I'm going to adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes for a comfort break, so we will return at 25 to 8. Okay, members, thank you for returning fairly promptly after the comfort break. I believe I've had a matter of urgent business come to my attention. I believe Councillor Javard wishes to make a short statement. Councillor Javard.
You hungry? Don't panic, it's nothing major. Yeah, it's come to my attention in the last meeting, I made a slight error in a speech when we were speaking about the asylum seekers. I'm not making an apology for the speech, but I'll make an apology for the slight mistake. The Manchester Arena bomber wasn't an asylum seeker, he was the son of an asylum seeker who just happened to be a member of the Libyan Islamic fighting group. So I just want to put that on record, that is the mistake there, and that can be amended on the last meeting's minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gerard. We'll now move on to notices of motion. Motion number 1 has been submitted by Councillor Whittingham, which is set out on page 93 of the agenda. The motion will be referred to Cabinet without debate in accordance of Rule of Procedure 9.8, and the motion will come back to a future meeting of the Council for consideration. Motion number 2 has been submitted by Councillor Brown, which is set out on page 93 of the agenda. Councillor Brown, the floor is yours.
Good evening, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to speak. As an animal lover, I am proposing that this council continues to implement an outright ban on the practice of animals being given away as prizes. Furthermore, I propose that we as a council should inform the government stating our concerns and with the intention of implementing an outright ban on the practice of awarding animals as pets on both public and private land. Whilst I am sure we have all seen the seemingly innocent acts of winning a prize goldfish at the local fair and acknowledge that this has been part of tradition, the time has come to recognise the ethical concerns with this practice and to take action. I believe that the time is right to ban this outdated and detrimental tradition. Firstly, it is important to address the well-being of the animals involved. Animals deserve to be treated with respect, with compassion, and to be cared for in a stable environment conducive to their happiness and health. When they are treated as mere objects or commodities, we fail to meet these necessities and leave them open to the fate of uncertainty or mistreatment. The consequences of them being handed to people who lack the correct knowledge, resource, or desire to care for these animals can lead to a desperate, dire outcomes for these innocent beings and can lead to neglect, abandonment, or worse. Secondly, we cannot ignore the potential health risk involved with giving away animals as prizes, as it cannot be ignored that limited knowledge of certain species can have damaging consequences on both the winner and the wider public. In extreme circumstances, poor knowledge of animals being won as prizes can lead to injury or illness for those involved. Banning this practice would minimise the risk and promote responsible pet ownership. Furthermore, the practice of giving away animals as prizes undermines the progress made over a number of years in animal welfare. Society has become increasingly aware of animals' increasingly aware that animals are intelligent, sentient beings capable of feelings such as happiness, joy, fear and pain. Allowing the continued giving away of animals as prizes contradicts the progress and the strides we have taken towards becoming a more empathetic and compassionate society. In conclusion, the practice of giving away animals as prizes should be banned. Not only does it disregard the welfare of the animals, but it also perpetrates the disposable mindset, and that further harms these innocent creatures. By ending this practice, we can protect the well-being of animals, promote responsible pet ownership, and reflect that our shared commitment of building a compassionate borough. Thank you, and I do hope I have your support this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I've got Councillor McSteen down to second the motion. Do you wish to reserve your right, or do you want to speak now?
I do reserve my right to speak, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Those who wish to speak, I've got Councillor Byrne.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I please make a few comments regarding this motion? For discussion at this full council meeting, I myself also put in a motion that I'll now read out to you. Wigan Council to introduce an Article 4 direction borough-wide.
I don't think you're allowed to do that, Councillor Byrne.
All right, so as I said. Right, I'll start from... I wouldn't want to harm a goldfish, but I find it incredulous that Wigan Council should consider goldfish more important than housing issues for families in the borough. The most vulnerable families, those facing Christmas living in hostels and hotels with their children, or those at risk of eviction in the new year...
I don't think what you're saying is quite related to the motion. So
what it's related to is, I think this is an absolutely ridiculous motion, and the people of our borough, The people of our borough want local issues that are relevant to them debated in this chamber. I get weekly families ringing me up, contacting me, unable to get housing, at risk of eviction.
Again, you're straying away. You're straying away from the motion.
I haven't had any. I've had nothing about a goldfish ever and the welfare of goldfishes.
Councillor Byrne, can you just please try and stick to the content of the motion, what's relevant?
And I'm doing a lot better job than a lot in here. I'll tell you, I've had a lot more support.
Sit down,
Luke
Councillor
online.
Byrne.
No, I'm never allowed to speak. I'm just saying, I think
I'm
this is very
I'm the mayor of this
objectionable.
borough, and if I tell you to sit down, you sit down. Gerard, do you want to speak?
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks for bringing this motion to the chamber. I quite agree. I think the giving away of animals as prizes is archaic, you know. But at the end of the day, where do we stop with this? You know, don't make a big splash about it, but you know, do we stop giving chocolates and sweets away as prizes for the obesity crisis that we've got? Do we stop giving away cheap plastic toys and stuff like that? If we're speaking about giving prized animals away, you know, guinea pigs and whatever, you know, yeah, totally agree. But a goldfish at the fair, you know, it's happened for years, and yeah, I'm with you that it should be banned, but as Councillor Hearn has alluded to, there are more pressing matters. But yeah, I will be agreeing with it, but like I say, I do think we have got a bit more pressing matters than this, and we should be spending time on that. But yeah, I totally agree, it is archaic, it's a blast from the past, and it needs to stay there, basically. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gerard. We have Councillor Watson now.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, for allowing me to speak on this. And I don't want to school anyone on how to write motions, but can the councillor be specific about any animals that do get given away as prizes other than goldfish? Because for the times I take my daughter out to fairgrounds, and I think this is what we're talking about really, is fairgrounds, carnivals, those type of events, it's generally goldfish that are given away as prizes. It's not you sort of like, you know, your guinea pigs or anything like that, or not to my knowledge. So if you could educate me on that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Contribution. Councillor Prescott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, for allowing me to speak on this motion. The motion is a valid motion, or it wouldn't be before council this evening. We all have an option to vote, to support, to vote against, or to abstain. The council is right to bring this before full council. It may not be of the same magnitude of a lot of the things that we discuss, but it is an important issue for a lot of people who are animal lovers. I have dogs myself, and I'm sure a lot of us here have pets. I take the points that have been raised by Councillor Watson. Maybe it's seen as a tradition, but it may be a tradition that needs to be changed, because causing suffering to any animal is wrong. So I support the motion, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prescott. Councillor McSteen, did you want to use your right to this?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, for allowing me to speak on this. Members, as the seconder of this motion, I'd like to lend my full support to Councillor Brown in advocating for the continuation of our outright ban on the giving of live animals as prizes on Wigan Council land. And in particular, that we also write to the government to urge them to consider an outright ban on all land, which will remove any distinctions and any loopholes that those engaged in this outdated practice are currently able to exploit. The motion set forth by Councillor Brown is not merely a legislative proposal. It's a statement about our community's values and our commitment to the well-being of living creatures within our borough. It reflects a shared understanding that animals are creatures deserving of respect, care and protection. Our ban on giving live animals as prizes on Wigan Council land was a commendable step forward in supporting the RSPCA's campaign to ensuring the ethical treatment of animals in our public spaces. At the core of this, it's worth stating a fact I know every member of this chamber has the capacity to acknowledge. Animals are not objects to be won, passed over and discarded. They're living beings with complex needs and, most importantly, the ability to experience suffering. By maintaining and reinforcing our present ban on this practice on public land, we continue to send a clear message to our borough and beyond that we prioritise compassion and responsible stewardship of animals in our care. It's a tangible expression of our commitment to creating an environment where animals are treated with both dignity and kindness. Most importantly, however, I fully endorse this motion's proposal for the Council to write to the UK Government urging an outright ban on giving live animals as prizes on all land, whether that's public or private. We've already seen a precedent set on this issue recently locally, with other councils following suit, such as Bolton, who very recently passed this motion with unanimous cross-party support from their members. Given the growing number of councils that are fully supporting the RSPCA's campaign, this is clearly a matter that extends beyond our local jurisdiction. It's a call for a new nationwide standard that upholds ethical treatment of animals throughout the UK. Members, the impact of our collective voice is significant. By reaching out to the government, we can support our residents and other councils by contributing to a broader movement seeking to establish a consistent and a comprehensive approach to the treatment of animals across our nation. As representatives of our community and wards, we have a duty to advocate for policies which reflect our shared values and contribute to a better society. The ban on giving live animals as prizes is one such policy that aligns with the principles, the compassion and the responsibility of everyone in this chamber, and it represents the voice of our residents, a number of which have contacted me about this campaign, and I suspect have emailed many of you too. In summary, I urge every member of our council to support Councillor Brown's motion, both for the continuation of our outright ban on the giving of animals as prizes on Wigan Council land, and to take our stance further, as other councils already have demonstrated by writing to the government to extend this ban to private land too. I don't think there's anybody in this chamber tonight who doesn't believe that animals deserve the same protection of care and respect, regardless of whether they're on public or private land. We have already played our part in implementing this ban on public land, and it's now time for the government to step up and remove this legal distinction and legislate to ban this outdated practice on all land. After all, while animals being given as prizes have the capacity to experience suffering, they do not have the capacity to see this current legal distinction which governs whether it could happen to them or not. We do, however, and that's why I'll be supporting the motion, and I would welcome the support, as in other local councils, from every member in this chamber in the motion. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for that, Councillor McSteen. Councillor Brown, you're invited to sum up. Councillor Byrne, you've already spoken on this debate, so you're not allowed to speak again.
There's not much more I need to say other than what Councillor McSteen has said, but on Councillor Watson, as my colleague's just informed me, she's seen a dog being given away. This motion is about all live animals. It doesn't matter what animal that is, it's about all live animals. Also, this motion was first given many months ago, and I've made way many times and waited for an appropriate time, but I've continued to receive emails asking to support this motion, which is why it's been brought tonight. And that is all I'd like to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Okay, so can I put the motion to the vote? All those in favour of the motion, please show. Okay, all those against? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion is carried. We move on to motion number 3, which has been submitted by Councillor Merritt, which is set out on page 94 of the agenda. Councillor Merritt.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for letting me speak this evening. Since 2019, the demands upon children's services have risen significantly to levels that will not be sustainable for councils going forward without further substantial government intervention at a national level. But so far, the government has offered only a fraction of the 2.6 billion an independent review says is needed to make its own new social care strategy workable going forward. and therefore I propose that the Council writes to the Secretary of State for Education and the Children's Commissioner to urge the Government to fully fund its published strategy on children's social care, stable homes built on love, as recommended by the independent reviews, and to fund the family hubs for all areas, increase resources for early intervention for families at a universal level and across all partnerships, and meet the growing demand for additional support for children with special educational needs. So in July, the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee had 2 papers from the Children's Service Directorate. One was about children's social service, the other about special educational needs provision. Both papers outlined a significant growth in demand for services in children's social care and for support for children with special educational needs. So in line with other authorities, demand for children's social care services in Wigan has significantly increased since 2019. Reasons for this increase are manifold and are linked significantly to the COVID pandemic and a reduction in family services and early intervention between 2011 and 2019. In fact, the independent review of children's social care in 2022 shows that only some of the increased demand can be linked to population growth and the increase in separated children and young people. This spiralling increase in demand is not sustainable in terms of service provision or finances. We see evidence of pressure on the system at all levels, in our schools, on social care in the council, and on the pressure in the family courts, where demand is so huge that there is significant delay in decisions for children's future care. At the same time, there has been a notable rise in the demand for special educational needs provision, with many more children diagnosed with autism, speech and language needs, social, emotional and mental health needs, and moderate learning difficulties. Some of these have been exacerbated by the pandemic. Overall, government spending on children's services fell in the decade 2011 to 19, when the government closed up to 1,000 Sure Start centres and significantly reduced services in others. And since these closures, parents have struggled to access services and find the support they need in those early years. Something like 82% of parents spoken to by Action for Parents in September 2021 said they've been unable or struggled to access a service. And we know that councils have lost at least a third of their government funding since 2010. And yet most councils, including Wigan, have protected and even increased funding for children's services. But the increasing demand for these services will make sustaining the levels of funding really difficult going forward, when we are also facing the demands of an increasingly ageing population. It could be argued then that increased investment in children's services will be coming at a cost to other council services that are already stretched. Our children's service directors recognise we need to transform children's services to reduce going costs, but this will need increased government investment in the early help systems and early intervention to prevent an escalation to higher levels of need. And this is challenging when high-end demand is actually so huge. The government's Family Hub programme, an attempt to partially bring back a service that they scrapped in 2011, is an opportunity for such a development, but it has not been rolled out in all areas, including our own, and we are now having to implement a similar programme, but without the additional needs. The current children's social care system needs more early help and intervention for families. It needs more skilled and supported social workers, a reduction in the use of agency workers who cost twice as much and undermine the stability of the recruitment and retention system, and it needs to have less reliance on the private care market that makes profit from the needs of our most vulnerable children and families. The government, recognising the current system of social care is no longer fit for purpose, has recently published a strategy and consultation on children's social care called Stable Homes Built on Love. The strategy pledges to invest £200 million to address urgent issues facing children and families, laying the foundations of whole system reform and setting a national direction for change that focuses on help for families and young people, all of which we will totally agree with. However, independent reviews of this proposed strategy have identified that it would actually need £2.6 billion of investment if it's to adequately support this change programme, meaning the current government offer falls woefully short of this estimate. It has long been argued that an increase in provision for services that support families in the early years of a child's life and early intervention and support for families facing problems will save funding at a later stage when the problems are more critical. The same is true of children diagnosed with special educational needs. Children need support at the earliest possible time unless they are to face worse difficulties in later life. Without investment in the early stages, we as a society only store up problems and higher costs at a later stage. And of course the government will say it cannot afford this additional funding for children's services, but in times of financial plenty or stringency, all governments make political choices about how they will spend their money. Cutting taxes is one such choice. Cutting funding to public services is yet another choice. However, the human costs of failing to provide appropriate services for children are immeasurable. Children who are not quickly diagnosed and helped with their special needs lose valuable time and quickly fall behind in school, and children not receiving early appropriate social care support may end up in long-term care, where we know educational outcomes for long-term care leavers remain to be well below others. All this can impact on their achievements in later life and their life chances. The fact is, children's services needs investment now. The investment at the right time will have cost benefits later. Without this funding, local authorities like ours could be facing a £3 billion funding gap by 2025. I urge you all to support this motion to ask the government to increase its funding offer for children and young people now and fully fund the children's social care strategy, and also to ensure that family hubs are opened up in all areas and not just a selected few. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Merritt. Is the motion seconded, Councillor Bullen?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to second the motion. A timely report was sent to me just recently. It's the annual report for 2021-22 compiled jointly by the Children's Society, NSPCC, Barnardo's, Action for Children and the National Children's Bureau. As you know, all major children's charities. So I feel the report has some gravitas. The title of this report, interestingly, is The Well-Worn Path, as it shows the year-on-year erosion of children's social care budgets, while spending is rising massively. But for me, in another sense, it is a well-worn path for us as Labour politicians, as we continue to lobby for better resources from this government, a government which appears not to listen nor to care. Here are some facts from that report. Local authorities across England increased their spending on children's services by 800 million for the year 21-22, an unprecedented 8% rise from the previous year. Of this additional spending, £4 in every 5 went on late intervention services, as Councillor Merritt has mentioned. But we know that providing appropriate care, support and early intervention for children and families is vital. But the funding landscape has been subject to considerable change over the past 12 years. With demands and costs intensifying, children's services have consumed a growing proportion of local government budgets. And we're very aware of this in our own borough. It is only because of the significant resource and investment put into our children's services by this council that we have been able to function well, improving our services and meeting our children and families' needs. Without that considerable investment, we would not have been able to meet the current needs in our service, or, for example, increase our social care workforce, or transform our Startwell centres into family hubs, all of which will result in more families staying together in healthy ways, more children with stable and loving homes to grow up in, and fewer young people experiencing neglect, abuse, exploitation, or harm. A quick word about SEND funding, which is mentioned in the motion. Again, it's a story of government funding declining for local authority, in this case within the schools grant, but met with significant rise in demand. And the financial pressures in Wigan in relation to SEND are the growth in the number of education and healthcare plans, 35% increase in the number over the last 3 years. It's also the demand for independent special school placements out of borough, which are very expensive. And it's also due to an increase of the number of post-16 pupils with SEND. Again, it's that now well-worn path of government funding not meeting increased demands in our services. Mr. Mayor, we had hoped for better in the recent autumn statement, but sadly from this government it was not forthcoming for our children and families. Support the motion, colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Bullen. Do any other members wish to speak on the motion? If not... Oh, so Councillor Watson, sorry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Merritt and Councillor Bullen, for such a brilliant motion. And I'm so glad this has come back to Council as well, because I know you weren't well at the last Council meeting, or was it the time before when it was... Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm particularly quite keen and interested in Ambition 4, where it says, make care better for children in care and care leavers, being a care leaver myself, so how could I not support this? And you're totally right, we've absolutely been underfunded. I'd also like to praise Councillor Raymond and the finance team for keeping us in the black for the last couple of years as well. But in terms of writing to national government as well, I always like to provide a solution. Well, sometimes I like to provide a solution. So why don't we give them a solution of where we can get this money from? Okay, sometimes charity begins at home. And as you've rightly said, government funding, local government funding has been cut for years. So why don't we add to this when we write to national government to cut overseas aid? Because ultimately, if we are treading water at the moment, then we should not be giving money to other countries when our own children are suffering as well. So I'm fully supportive of this motion, and I'm sure that everybody else will be supportive as well. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Cunliffe has indicated.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I wasn't going to speak on this, but after that, I think I have to. Councillor Watson talks about this being a very good motion, as it is, and wanting adequate funding for children, young people and care leavers, for family hubs, is an issue that this council should rightly request of government, substantial and proper funding for that. To then link that to overseas aid, which has been significantly cut anyway, it's not our intention to ask the government. We're asking the government for more money. Where they get it from is up to them. But I think the description of Councillor Watson of get this from overseas aid shows the political leanings of the Atherton Independents, and they are a really, truly Tory light.
Councillor Watson, would you please indicate which rule or procedure when the council's constitution has been breached, and also outline how
Yes,
it has been breached.
I'll be happy to mention that. Within the Code of Conduct, which is part of the Constitution, item 3, bullying harassment. Bullying may be characterised as offences intimidate, malicious and insulting behaviour. By calling the independents Tory light is very insulting. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
I think we'll move on back to Councillor Merritt to sum up on the motion.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor. If I may be slightly controversial to say that I do think children's services are perhaps the least glamorous of council services, and I'm not sure whether that's because most of us as councillors are significantly more pressured by environmental services, housing, social care provision for the elderly, but a failure to provide for children and young people through education, social service and SEND services does store up problems and significant expenditure for us in later years, which could be averted by appropriate investment in early help for children, families in the early stages of children's lives and education. If we do not do that, we end up with an awful lot of expense in terms of high-end acute services that are needed to be provided for children and families in later life. If the government strategy Stable Homes Built on Love is to have any chance of succeeding, it's a good strategy. It looks at putting in that early intervention, putting in services early in a child's life, and early family help. But if it's going to succeed, it needs to be fully funded now. It can't be done on the cheap. Without additional government investment in those services, councils like ours could be facing insurmountable funding gaps in the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Merritt. Can I put this motion to the vote? All those in favour, please show. Okay, very good. Anybody against? Any abstentions? I think that's been carried unanimously, which is great. Motion 4 is being submitted by Councillor Cunliffe, which is set out on page 94 of the agenda. Councillor Cunliffe.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think this is a really important motion for the people of this town, and there are impending difficulties. So Wigan and Leigh Hospice is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year, 40 years since it opened, and it's provided high quality specialist palliative care for many people who are terminally ill at the end of life and for those with life-limiting conditions. And in that 40 years, over that 40 years, there are probably thousands of local people who benefited from those services. And what is of concern is that the model of partial statutory funding is putting the future of Wigan and Leigh Hospice in severe danger. The NHS funds 1/3 of the cost of the hospice. Therefore, 2/3 of the funding for the hospice has to be raised by charitable funds. The hospice needs to raise £12,000 every single day of the year. Just think about that, £12,000 every day to fund its services. And that partial statutory funding may have well worked well in the early days of the hospice sector. But now the hospices are expected to maintain the similar contractual and regulatory requirements that the NHS does. And there's no other area of healthcare anywhere in the country that must rely so heavily on charitable incomes and donations. to deliver what really are essential services. So the way the funding, hospice funding is approached really undermines the level of specialism of clinical staff. And the NHS seem to put hospices in the same category as a care home. But it's not a care home, is it? It's providing health care for those with terminal illness and life-limiting conditions. And it's providing specialist palliative care. Not only that, it's relieving pressure on the hospital. Can you imagine if those people with those terminal illnesses that require that specialist palliative care were in hospital taking up beds there, particularly with the pressures on the NHS now in the acute sector? But not only that, the quality of care that those people would get in Wigan Infirmary, albeit the staff very professional, but doctors and nurses working on acute medical ward with other patients in difficulties or illness or whatever, would not have the time to provide that specialist care that is provided at the hospice. And it's not only for the patient themselves, is it? The support they give to the families at a real time of stress, pressure, anxiety, watching one of your loved ones die or go through that process of dying. The support that comes from the hospice, not just for the patient, but for the whole family. In an environment that really is built to support and encourage that is really important. And so it's not only the hospital, the inpatient service at the hospice, is it? The hospice provide hospice at home to hundreds of people receiving palliative care at home and dying close to their family. It also gives support to the families themselves. And actually 96% of hospices this year are delivering a deficit budget. So it's not just Wigan and Lee Hospice, it's the whole hospice service. Wigan and Lee are one of those that are really struggling. So, because they're delivering a deficit budget, they're having to use reserves. But the reserves are dwindling. And they've had to use £1 million of reserves this year to maintain facilities. And actually, because of the situation with reserves, that's not possible for 24-25. The hospice in Wigan provides 14 inpatient beds. So the NHS provides a third of the funding. So literally, just four beds were funded by the NHS, and the other 10 were funded by charitable donations. So actually, if they don't receive the funding, or a better funding, then they will have to reduce the number of inpatient beds. But interestingly enough, there's an external analysis that suggests that far from 14 beds being adequate for a borough the size of Wigan, we should have double the number of beds. And that's particularly true because the level of deprivation in the borough, which brings about poor health and less healthy life expectancy, and the number of cancer deaths, COPD, lung cancer deaths, all that, we have a higher factor. So actually, we should be having twice the number of beds we have, and in fact, without resolving the funding issue, then the hospice will have to reduce the number of beds. So it appears to me that hospice bed is cheaper than a hospital bed, and so actually it would be financially beneficial if the NHS gave a much fairer settlement to hospices in order to maintain the services, and in fact increase funding to increase the number of beds for Wigan, that would be an answer. And it would actually save costs for the NHS, because hospital beds are a lot more expensive. So we are really at a point where the hospice service in this borough, after 40 years, could be reduced. And I'm sorry to say that as of November this year, Wigan and Leigh Hospital has still not received a contract for its 23-24 funding. For this year's funding, it's still not received its contract, which started in April. So I just think that what I'm asking the council to do is recognise the issue that the hospice is facing and write not only to the local system board within Wigan, for health and social care within Wigan, but write to the Greater Manchester Integrated Care Board, who, as of July last year, have all of NHS funding, but also write to NHS England and the Secretary of State for Health. Because whilst I'm talking about Wigan and Leigh Hospice, 96% of hospices are having to use reserves and in that. And it would be a terrible situation if this country and the NHS did not fund people at the end of life receiving the care that they need, and for those people with life-limiting conditions. So I'm hoping the strength of this council that this will go through unanimously to express to those bodies the sense of feeling and the requirement of justice for hospices to continue to maintain the services that they do.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Cunliffe. I believe Councillor Fletcher, you want to second the motion?
Yeah, I second Mr. Mayor, and I'll speak now. Okay. Yeah. So it's just to say this, it's an absolute privilege to second this motion. I don't think there's many motions that carry the weight of importance as this, and I know there are very few things that we all agree on in this chamber, but when it comes to the hospice getting the correct funding, you know, I'd like to think we get unanimous support. But without going through the financials too much, because I know Councillor Cunliffe has comprehensively gone through it. In fact, he's probably gone through most of what I was going to say. But I mean, I hope to offer a more patient perspective, you know, families who are actually in the hospice. And I know last month me and Councillor Cunliffe visited the hospice in Hindley, which we spoke to staff, patients, families, and all amazing people. And that was the first time I'd ever stepped foot in a hospice, actually. I know my nan did have some care at home through the hospice. But the warmth that you feel, whoever's, you know, I'm not sure if anyone's been through a hospice door, the warmth you feel walking through, the acceptance, from the paint on the walls to the smiles of the receptionists, it's unbelievable. And it hits you that it's the people who walk through those doors are entering the last stages of their life as well. You know, that kind of hit me afterwards. And so, yeah, I mean, the patients that I spoke to, they insisted on me delivering to this chamber some comments. And so I hope you're okay, Mr. Mayor. There's three patients that wanted to give their views. The first chap is called Mark. His wife, Louise, was cared for by the hospice earlier this year. And his comment, I quote Mark, "I really can't thank the hospice enough for the support they gave our family in those final weeks. As a family, we now want to do as much support as possible to make sure other families have the same care and love that they experience." So that was Mark, Mr. Mayor. And an interesting chap called Paul, patient Paul, and I quote Paul, this is Paul, so I have been in agony in hospital, which Councillor Cunliffe refers to. I mean, the alternative is a hospital. So I've been in agony in hospital, but within 3 days of coming to the hospice, my pain was under control. The team made me feel at ease. It's such a caring place. You get properly looked after. And the final patient is Doreen, and she had a wit about her, you know, and she was optimistic in the face of such overwhelming health issues. And she was an avid social media in her 80s, and she was, those of you who don't know as well, we have an Ashton social media, quite a presence, and she's avid on that, and she doesn't hold back against me as well, in a funny way. But I quote Doreen, and she sums it up perfectly. You know, it's brief, but it's to the point. Doreen says, "It's like taking a deep breath. They brought me back. That's what they've done. They brought me back. They made me feel like me again." So, Mr. Mayor, yeah, so those three patients, it's important that this chamber understands the impact it's having, obviously on the finances, but also on the real-life people, our constituents. And so that's brief. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to second this motion. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Reid is indicated.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just following on from Councillor Fletcher, I wanted to kind of put a bit of a different aspect on it. I don't think there'll not be anybody in this chamber who's not been affected or touched by the hospice in some way. So earlier this year, my best friend passed away in the hospice in May. After an 18-month battle with cancer, where I followed him through that journey. And when everything we spoke about here, about everything, so he had excellent care at Christie's, did all the trials, went through so much stuff and had nothing but praise and kind of optimism of where he went through it. When it came to kind of them final months, which we didn't know would have been the final months, he'd collapsed in the house. I found him once. Ring the ambulance, you're taken into Wigan Infirmary, and if everybody goes into A&E, you'll know the effects A&E has. He was in there for 12 hours. Didn't get the care because you've not got the people who could give you that care. Was then transferred to a ward, and within a day, taken out to that ward back home. Within 2 days, collapsed again, back into hospital, 14 hours in A&E, into a ward, the same again. Back into Christie's, where there again, excellent care. But once you come to that realism, and I was in the room with him, and this story goes on for quite a long time, and I've told this story to many people, even when he was still with us. When Christie's sit in a room with a specialist and go, "We can't do any more," I hope I'm never in that position. And when they actually tell you that, and they said, "What do you want to do?" And he looked and he chatted, and he said, "I want to go in the hospice." Now, he's never been in the hospice. He's never been through the door. He's heard about it. They kind of said to him, "Are you sure? Are you not being pushed down this avenue?" "No, that's what I want to do." So they asked him the question, why? One, he didn't want to be a burden on his wife because she couldn't offer him that care at home, and it would be really hard for her. He didn't want to be kind of at home, not getting the pain relief, as Danny kind of quoted, that people need, being took back into A&E and going through that same rhythm when you're actually in them last few weeks. He wanted to go in the hospice because he knew he would get 24/7 care. He would get all the people helping him in there. The family could visit as much as they wanted, and he went through that period. He couldn't praise the staff enough. They helped him so much. In them last few weeks, he did 3.5 weeks in there. I was with him, with my wife and his wife, when he finally passed away. And we had nothing but admiration for everything that went in there. And I think you've got to follow that journey, and I'm sure lots of people can tell different stories. But I think it's that kind of, as Keith said, the burden on the NHS, where they're not trained enough to deal with that palliative care. They've not got the capacity, they've not got the time, they've not got the energy, and that reflects on them people. But it costs more, as Keith said. So what we should be looking here is, we know what it costs to keep the hospice. We should be promoting the hospice even further. We know there's a need, because the other end of it is, people wait to go in the hospice. They don't automatically get a bed in the hospice because it could be full. So then people then either suffer at home or in A&E and that transformation. Our residents and the people of this country deserve better than that. And in the final months of somebody's life, it's so important that you have that. We've just done the fundraising for the hospice at the Ball. where they've raised £44,000, which is a magnificent amount of money. But as Keith said, that's gone in a flash. We know how important the NHS is. We know how important the hospice is. And it's time something, government finances directed, when we talk about it every day, where the finances are shifted here, there and everywhere in millions, this is where they should be pushed towards for helping them people, because it's a need that we need me to forward. And I think, as Keith said, it's probably one of the most important things we've probably put forward to this council for a long, long time. I'm sure everybody in this chamber will support it, and it's really needed, and we've all got stories to tell. But thank you for listening. Thank you.
Councillor Prescott.
Mr. Mayor, I can fully identify with what Chris has just said. I support the motion. I've seen the specialist treatment that hospices provide for people who have incurable diseases, cancer, etc. My father passed away in a hospice when he was suffering from cancer some years ago. I actually then got the opportunity for a short period of time to actually work as a volunteer in Wigan Hospice myself. The journey that you go on for people who are diagnosed with that kind of incurable disease, whether that's cancer or not, is a long path. And obviously the national health is something that we all are very proud of, we support. We know in many, many areas they are experts and the staff are very, very good. But the specialist treatment that hospices provide, if you actually get the opportunity to see the care, the attention to each individual who remain an individual, a named person, how they manage people's pain, which is the most crucial thing, I think, when it comes to the treatment that people receive in hospices. I support what Keith's motion says and what it sets out. There needs to be the recognition, not the acceptance. I think people often think they're there if we need them, they always will be. Clearly, that's not the case. There should be more done nationally, and I think by government to support the work that happens here. So I support the motion, Keith, and I think that everyone in the chamber, in fact I'm sure everyone in the chamber is going to support this. I hope it's a unanimous vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prescott. Councillor Gerard.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillors Cunliffe and Fletcher, for bringing this motion to the chamber. It is very important, and as we say, hospice is a vital part of our wider healthcare system, and it's unfair and unrealistic, really, for the government to allow their funding to fall short and expect local.
Point of order, but I respect, in terms of the actual content of your comment, yes, I agree. Can we all respect that request, please, to leave your phones alone?
Thanks for that. I'm not bothered with anything anyway, you know. Yeah, so I think for the government to allow funding of hospices to fall short and expect local communities to support hospices generously to make up the shortfall is completely wrong. I think just reading online here, it's with the inflation, it's £47 million short with the inflation. So I fully support this, and we shouldn't, I think, just be asking to plug the 47 million shortfall. We should be asking for more for the fantastic services our hospices do in this borough and across the country. And I'm sure we all want to see end-of-life care and bereavement services properly funded and available to anyone that needs it. And to lose any of that would be devastating, really, to our communities. But we need the integrated care boards to properly plan and meet the demand of the palliative care, and in the area to provide fair funding to the boroughs. But we need those integrated care boards to be properly funded by the government. And I think that's the key, and I'll fully support this. end of the care shouldn't be determined by a postcode lottery, you know, which is what I think we've got here really at the moment. And so, yeah, we fully support that over here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gerard. I think we can move to put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Oh, sorry, Councillor, did you want to come back, Councillor Cunliffe? Or do you want to go to the vote?
I did. I wanted to thank Councillor Gerard for his contribution. It certainly just shows how important it is, and Chris and Paul's stories, you know, and we'll all have stories of people who've been through that. But I think what we're asking for is that the NHS should fund hospice care fully. Any charitable donations should really be to enhance the services and provide additional services. And so I think in writing to the System Board, to the ICB, to NHS England and the Secretary of State, what we're asking for, and really for Wigan and Lee Hospice, that's important this year, this next year, now. But what we want is a more sustainable funding settlement, because as a key provider of the core specialist palliative care and end-of-life care, it's really important. And I've already said that essentially Wigan has half the number of beds at the hospice that it needs. So far from reducing it, we need to be increasing it. And they must, the NHS must pay inflationary costs and NHS pay rises. So it's all right the government giving NHS pay rises to staff working in the NHS, but then when they give the hospice, they don't give them the cost of the wage increase for nursing staff and that. So they need to fully fund any pay awards as well and inflationary costs. And they also need security and certainty with the contractual arrangements and this yearly allocation of funds. They need a minimum of 3 years at a time to plan the finances. It's no good waiting, you know, we're in November, December now, for an indication of what you're going to get from April next year, albeit that they haven't had the contract for this year that they're doing. So there really needs to be full cost recovery. There needs to be security and certainty in terms of length of contracts, and a more sustainable funding settlement needs to be done from them. And actually, they should delegate the commissioning of hospice to the locality and not to the broader ICB, because it's us in Wigan who know what the requirements of the hospice are. So give us the money and we'll commission the services from them and work closer with the hospice. And generally, just a better recognition of the contribution that hospices make. And like I said, over 40 years, thousands of people. I think there's 14 beds in there. They probably see a couple of hundred patients a year, because obviously length of stay is not very long because people are at the end of their lives. But they're also supporting somewhere around about 900 people receiving hospice at home and hospice care at home. You know, for people who want to stay with the family, the support that the family need to do that. So we need to develop that whole package for the hospice, and that should be part of the letter, but I will speak to Alison about that in forming the letter up. But clearly that's what we're asking for. So I would hope it would be unanimous, because that would signify, you know, the level of support within the council for this.
Thank you, Councillor Cunliffe. We will now move to the vote. All those in favour of the motion, please show. And it is unanimous. Thank you very much for that. So we come to the final motion, which has been submitted by Councillor Cleave and is set out on page 95 of the agenda. Councillor Cleave.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to speak. The purpose of my motion tonight is to ask this council to submit an appeal to government towards a long-term legislative solution that modernises the taxi and private hire vehicle sector, addressing the issue of cross-border hiring and prioritise passenger safety and fair competition. Cross-border hiring is a term used to describe a situation where taxis or private hire vehicles licensed in one area work predominantly or wholly in another area. Currently, there is no legislation to prevent this, providing the operator, driver and vehicle are licensed in the same licensing authority, and the bookings are accepted in that authority. This is often referred to as triple lock, and this is considered a loophole in out-of-date legislation. As local councillors, we are often asked on what can be done to stop out-of-border taxis operating in our borough. And I know most of you will think of Wolverhampton in this scenario. This is an ongoing nationwide concern for local authorities. Cross-border hiring impacts local authorities' ability to ensure consistent standards, enforce compliance, and it also undermines key objectives for local areas in raising standards. Most importantly, it is the impact it has on our public safety that is of utmost concern. This loophole is also creating unfair competition and is financially impacting those licensed in Wigan who work wholly or predominantly in this borough. Vehicles that travel into Wigan from another local authority are not aware of any local restrictions in relation to parking or waiting, and are consequently are therefore often parking on or near to a taxi rank, giving the impression they are illegally applying for hire, which is causing tensions amongst our taxi drivers, as well as confusion for members of the public. As a local authority, we always encourage our residents and visitors to use local taxis or private hire vehicles so that they can be satisfied that they are operating to minimum licensing standards and all the relevant checks have been completed. This is promoted as part of our Get Home Safe campaign. Unfortunately, without the necessary primary legislation, the root cause of this issue will remain and the risk to passenger safety will increase. The safety of the travelling public of Wigan and Lee Borough is the main consideration of our regulation committee. I feel that legislation requiring a journey to start or finish in the licensing area and that the three entities, operator, driver and vehicle, are licensed would eliminate this issue. I hope that you can vote for this motion to ensure the safety of the travelling public in our borough and allow us to regulate in the same way we regulate all local taxis. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Vickers?
And reserve the right.
Okay. Do any other members wish to speak on this motion? Councillor Gerard.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for bringing this motion to the council. Firstly, Alison, I'd like to, with it being the Christmas, I'd like to offer you some pack of pens I bought you for Christmas, with the amount of writing that you have to be doing to the government lately. I've also taken out the liberty to take out shares in BIC and Basil and Bond, and it's looking quite good actually. But I support the motion, and I think what we're all is relating to is Uber and the backfilling of the licence. As you mentioned, the triple lock is where they can operate, they can be in that area, and even though the job might come in, say in Wigan, it'll go back to the licence back in Wolverhampton, won't it? So I don't know if we're going to get around that, or how the government are going to regulate it now, because the cat's already out of the bag, isn't it? I think we'd all be lost. A lot of us would be lost if we couldn't get an Uber. Getting a local taxi at the moment is pretty now impossible. But if we can get this regulated again and back to some kind of order and bring back our own taxi firms, that'd be fantastic. So, well, I support it. I'm not too sure about Paul. But I certainly support it. Thank you.
Councillor Exteen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's only a brief one. Just wanted to share a story that this is not an issue that's limited solely to our council. It's one that's limited to others. Just over a week ago, myself, Councillor Eastoe and a number of other people were attending the Labour conference in Blackpool, and we took a taxi ride there. Absolutely gorgeous vehicle, electric vehicle, really nice smooth ride, had a great time. And the taxi driver was decrying the standards of taxis all the way through there. And just before we left, I said, all right, yeah. I said, is it an issue in Blackpool then? He said, oh, well, I don't have to worry about it. I'm registered in Wolverhampton. So it is an issue that's clearly affecting other councils as well. I think it's something I certainly support. We see issues at licensing and regulation on a regular basis. And it's a point that comes up all the time, which I'm sure John will allude to very shortly. Yeah, I completely support the motion. I think it's brilliant. It would be great to have unanimous support for this, but we'll see how we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Misteen. Councillor Vickers, do you want to exercise your right?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I'm very grateful for the people who have spoken and who have alluded to the fact that, you know, out-of-town taxis do cause a problem. And we're not just talking about Uber taxis, which are a significant problem at the moment, but also to our local private operators who have no alternative but if approached to hire Wolverhampton plated taxi drivers. And it does cause a problem because as a regulation committee, we do have the powers to take licences, suspend licences, to give written warnings to people licensed in our authority. But if a taxi driver isn't licensed in our authority, then there's nothing we can do about it. And that is a concern to people of the public. Now, for a lot of people in the Wigan Borough, private hire or hackney carriages are their chosen preference for public transport. We can control hackney carriages, but we cannot control private hires. And there is nothing, and we've asked this countless times at Regulation Committee, there is nothing that we can do to stop private hire operators in this borough hiring and using Wolverhampton or even others. Sefton's another one that comes to mind. So it is a concern, and it's something that we need to do something about. The government need to do something about it, and I certainly support and would like everybody else to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Councillor Cleave, do you want to sum up?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As John has just said, it's not just Wolverhampton Council, although they are primarily the one we get most complaints about. All taxis that are licensed in Wigan Borough all go through our same testing driver centre, which every single taxi is licensed to the same standards. Out-of-borough taxis are not. They have less standards. The legal term for a driver is a fit and proper person. We can't regulate those taxi drivers that are not licensed in Wigan Borough. We have no way of knowing if they are a fit and proper person. If there's any complaints about the taxi driver or the vehicle, they have to go back to the authority in which they were licensed. Wigan are powerless to do anything about it. So thank you so much to everyone who's spoken on this, and I really hope every single person in this chamber will support this motion tonight to primarily keep our residents safe when they're using these taxis and give them confidence that they can use these taxis safely. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cleave. Can I put this motion to the vote now? All those in favour, please show. And again, that's unanimous. That's great. So that actually concludes the business for this evening. Can I wish you a safe journey home and a happy Christmas and New Year. Take care.